Hey,
Hey,
Homeworthy.
Homeworthy.
I'm Caitlin,
And I'm Kurt.
and welcome to our 1800s first home. Come on in.
You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story.
Hi, my name is Kaitlin Strittmatter. I am the designer and founder for my design business, Aurora Designed. I create soulful, artistic, and poetic brand identities and custom websites for other creative small businesses, and I work in my little design studio upstairs.
And my name is Kurt Strittmatter, and I own my own business as well. I'm a small business loan broker, and I work in the garage. So it's a little different than where Kate works, but it's a good space out there.
And welcome to our first home. So we are in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, in the middle of almost nowhere, and we live in a home that was built in 1825. So we are truly living within a piece of history, which is absolutely magical. I would consider our home style to be European farmhouse. So you have a lot of the European, Italian, old world, vintage-esque kind of vibes of the first portion, and then more of the countryside farmhouse, rustic, really lived in, homey kind of feeling of the second. We were actually on our way to tour this home because our realtor said it was going to be on and off the market pretty fast just because of how gorgeous it is. And Kurt's Tesla broke down in the middle of the highway in Virginia, so I left him there and I actually toured it by myself. I had Kurt on FaceTime.
I saw us all through the FaceTime.
Yeah, and immediately when we walked in, I think I knew that this was the home, and you just trusted my judgment, kind of.
So
you also loved it
Good thing
too.
you drove up in the U-Haul without me, yeah.
Or else we probably would have lost it. Some guy actually came by after we had moved in and everything, and he was like, oh yeah, I was actually gonna tour this house right after you guys immediately put the offer on it. So we really lucked out, and I'm so happy that we did continue that tour after the Tesla issue.
Yeah, 100%.
Our home was built in 1825, which means we are truly living within a piece of history, and I find that to be absolutely magical. Our home actually has 3 front doors that all lead into this first floor of the home, and a fun fact is that we actually never use our primary original front door. Number one, because it opens up into our living room and our dining room space, which just doesn't make that much sense from a flow perspective. And number two, because it actually doesn't even have a doorknob on either side, which is one of the many little quirks we have found and discovered in this very old home, which just adds to the charm of it. So we primarily use this side door, which also happens to be a Dutch door, as our primary enter and exit space. And that obviously leads us into the room we are standing in, which is the foyer. Our foyer is the only room in the house that actually doesn't have the original pumpkin pinewood flooring that you'll see in the kitchen, and instead has a really beautiful deep gray slate tile. This is also the only room in the house that has the gorgeous exposed rustic beams on the ceiling that I will forever wish continued into every other room of the house. I feel like it creates that really authentic farmhouse kind of feel immediately upon entering into the home. This 1920s Hungarian pine bench is the first piece that I ever purchased for this space. I actually bought it when we were down south visiting my husband's family. It popped up on an antique store website that I absolutely love ordering from, and I immediately knew that I had to have it. So we quickly mocked it up in their kitchen and kept our fingers crossed that it would transfer over into our space really well without actually being here to measure. And it did, and she looks stunning. So that is the focal point of the room, and then everything else kind of balances and transitions away from that. So first we have one of our many antique rugs that we have throughout the house. This one is a Turkish runner rug that I believe to be from the 1960s or 1970s. It has the beautiful grays that kind of bring in the tones of the floor, and then it also has the beautiful browns and beiges that obviously brings in the bench and all of our other wooden accents. Then above that we have our beautifully oversized custom-made wooden peg rack that is from a local antique store, Chelsea Forge Antiques and Designs. Most of our things are from that place. It is amazing, and it's right over the river in New Jersey. One of the best parts about having a first home and a home like this is all of the trial and error that really goes into styling. So before we had this really large one, I actually had one that was the size of maybe a quarter of this, and it simply did not work scale-wise. So I was very, very happy to find this beautiful, large, beautiful piece, and it kind of encapsulates the whole upper portion of this wall. On it, we hang pretty much anything that one would tend to reach for as they're leaving or entering our space. We have little wicker hats for when it's sunny outside, farmer's market bags for when you're going to the grocery store, a cardigan for when Pennsylvania gets ever so cold, gardening materials for the spring and summer, dried florals that you picked from your garden, and then little knickknacks that you may have stolen from your grandparents' basement. Next, we have in this corner our favorite wrought iron coat rack that we got from a very, very special family member. Obviously, this is just where we hang all of our coats, but during our annual Christmas party, which is, we call it the Cottage's busiest night of the year, I always like to come in here at the very end of the night, and all the coats are quite literally piled up to the ceiling. I don't know how it doesn't fall over, but it's just one of those moments where you walk in and it's just like a very homey, all your friends are filling your first home kind of feeling. Moving over to our window treatments, I tend to kind of dance back and forth between our full scale, fully linen, really heavy, like your usual curtains. And then I also like to do touches like this, which are more of a raw material such as vintage lace or vintage cotton, vintage linen, and kind of just romantically drape it over our window for more of like an effortless touch. So we're kind of going back and forth between the more structured classic elegance and then something more whimsical and dainty like this. Last part for over here, because we live in such a small home, we don't have too much storage, so we tend to utilize a lot of our wall space for things that we can just easily grab. Like obviously we have the peg rock wall, and then we use a whole lot of these really cute whimsical hooks. Most likely they're either antique brass or antique iron and have cute little designs on them, so we pop them up all over all the rooms and kind of just hang like a barn coat, a scarf, a purse, whatever we may need. As far as other wall decor goes, you'll see a whole lot of paintings in our home, but other than that, as an artist, I pretty much like to collect anything that feels really artistic, and a lot of times that means antique plateware, so I love having those out on display as well. Moving into the back part of this room, we have a quick little side table, which is where I kind of start to introduce the concept of lots and lots of layering in our home. I feel like a collected home where you can see the homeowner's treasures that they've gotten throughout the years is something that's really cool and really special, and you get to just see all of their personalities, what they like, etc. So we have lots and lots of very colorful books, plants, dried plants, candles, and one of my forever favorite antique wooden carved mirrors. I think it's really important to have some kind of a mirror in the foyer, both to bounce light off of since this is just such a deep space, and also to like quickly check yourself as you're leaving or for guests when they are entering. She's one of my favorites. Ending in this corner over here, this is where we start to introduce a lot of our wedding mementos as home decor. The decor from the wedding meshes really nicely with the decor of the rest of our home, which is great because then I can have it all out on display. So this is a welcome banner that we had hanging at the entrance to the venue, welcoming guests to the reception space, and now it hangs in our foyer, welcoming guests into our home, which is very poetic to me. And then we have our save the date design tucked into a beautifully oversized antique frame. I will expand on the antique frame concept later. But both designs were done by Vanessa with By V. So wildly talented.
So we've been together for about 5 years. We met in 2019 actually on Hinge, the dating app. And we actually met at a local brewery, the Lone Eagle over in Flemington. Right from then we kicked it off, right? Like there was,
yes.
I mean, we had our first date, and then I think 2 weeks later we went on our second date. And then come the third and fourth date, we were boyfriend and girlfriend. And then from there.
Asked me very early.
Yeah.
We both kind of knew what we wanted, I think, going into it, especially because we did meet on an online dating app. I wish our story was a little more romantic than that.
We like to say we met at a brewery.
Yeah.
Just to make it more
Sounds
fun.
much cooler. And then we went to Chili's after, very fine dining restaurant.
Yes.
So very low key first date, and then we kind of just had a very fun adventure ever since.
Yep.
So our wedding style is pretty much very similar to our home style. We actually got engaged and closed on this home within 3 months ahead of each other. Not something I would entirely recommend. It was quite a stressful time planning a wedding and filling our first home. But it also allowed me to really expand creatively, which was so much fun, telling both stories at once. So ironically, both styles kind of merged into each other. I mentioned our home style being more of that European farmhouse kind of vibe. Our wedding style was a little bit more of the Italian countryside, at least that's what we told all of the vendors. So you had the Italian European style in the beginning, and then it was woven in with a lot of countryside, homey, vintage-esque details. And we truly had, I think, the best day of our lives.
Best day in the world.
Best day in the world. And also just being surrounded by all of our favorite family and friends, or all of our family and friends in general, and being surrounded by so much artistry and so many creative vendors was a blast. So now we are standing in our downstairs bathroom, which also happens to be 3 or 4 times the size of our primary one upstairs. So there is lots of room to play design-wise and to fill it with. First, we have our wallpaper that I mentioned. This is from Anthropology, and I really love the moodiness and the dark vibes that it gives off immediately upon entering into the space, especially because our floors are very dark as well. Then we have our gorgeous cast iron clawfoot tub. I am obsessed with these. I will forever wish that we had one upstairs. Unfortunately, we don't use this one too often. We actually use it to water all of our plants, so the plants are very lucky. Because our home is 200 years old, I really try to decorate with things that have that same sense of really lived-in, old-looking, character-rich qualities. So most of the time that means lots of old wood, cast iron, silver, brass, bronze, all the things that kind of just have that richness look to them. A few examples of that are our antique bench that I just have a few candles sitting on with the silver holders. And then we have the original wooden peg rack that used to be on the bench or above the bench out there. And you can see how that size just simply did not work and looked quite funny above such a big bench. So now it lives in here, goes along with the wooden beams, and matches really nicely with the cotton towels hanging on top. Then we have some collected art on the bottom. I mentioned that there will be art everywhere in our home. Art is very, very important to me, especially original art where you can truly see all of the gorgeous artistic painterly details. I also really like collecting them on the floor. I have art covering all the walls in our house, but I really like the concept of having such a big art collection that sometimes it just needs to kind of gather onto the floor in a pile. That seems really also poetic to me, so that's kind of what they're doing down here. Now we can head into our kitchen.
So my favorite room in the house is definitely the kitchen, I would say, only because, well, you guys will see on the tour, but it's a beautiful stone wall on the left side as soon as you enter the kitchen. It's just beautiful. It just takes your breath away. And it's just a great ambiance in the morning. We put the jazz music on and everything like that. So it's just, it's very warm, very comforting, and that's my favorite room.
Took my answer.
I did?
Right. Same thing. I also really love the kitchen. I also really love to cook, which I'll explain during the tour as well. The stone wall, side by side with the hardwood flooring, is just absolutely magnificent. I love how it turned out. I think it's very, very romantic, elegant, and still goes along with the whole European farmhouse kind of vibe. So now we are standing in our cottage kitchen. This is the room in the house where the gorgeous original pumpkin pinewood flooring begins, and then it continues all throughout the rest of the home. A note about the ones in here, the floorboards are giant. They're much bigger than the ones over there. So many people have commented how wide they are in here, which just makes this space even more unique. Or I mentioned previously that this space is probably my favorite in the entire home, obviously because of the gorgeous stone wall that encapsulates one half of the sides. We believe that this used to be the original exterior to, again, the original part of the home, only because of the wear that you see on some of the rocks. It appears to have been outside, possibly at some point. Hopefully this year we'll get to the library and actually figure out the whole history of what it started as, the add-ons, etc. But that would be a really cool fun fact if that was at some point the exterior. Starting with my favorite piece, in the whole room. This has been on my Cottage antique wish list for a very long time, and it is a French rolling baker's rack. I found this on Facebook Marketplace a mere 2 hours away in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So my husband and I went out and got her and brought her home, and now she holds all of the start of my antique ceramic pottery collection. At some point, this will all be filled with really colorful bowls, different textures, different styles, and I'm really excited to see what that'll look like. That'll be a very beautiful little corner over here. And then I also mentioned in the foyer utilizing a lot of our wall space for storage, hooks, etc. And that continues well into our ceiling in the kitchen. Obviously, you can see a ton of woven and gorgeous wicker baskets that we kind of just have sporadically hanging. I have this really specific vision of myself someday when we have a garden. That's a whole project that we're hoping to start in the spring. I could just come over into the kitchen and grab a little basket off of the ceiling, go out and pick my fruits and veggies and bring them in my little harvest basket and then throw it back up top. So I'm really excited to do that one day. So this is just in preparation for that. And then intertwined, I just have a lot of dried florals just because I think they look really gorgeous, kind of tucked in between all of the wicker. Moving over into this corner, this is one of my favorite vignettes of the whole house. This is where we house all of our unique different cutting boards, and then I have them all sitting on top of a vintage writing desk. That's another good example of just repurposing something old and using it in a new light. And then up top I have one of our gorgeous antique French Baroque, I think it's repose style mirrors, and I really love the juxtaposition it creates with the really ornate, elegant style of the mirror against the more really rustic raw material of the stone. I think the contrast is just absolutely stunning. As I mentioned, I absolutely love cooking. It's become super ritualistic for me. I love coming down after work, meeting my husband, putting on we call it coffee shop jazz music, and just cooking and doing lots of dancing in the kitchen. As cliche as that sounds, we have made a lot of memories just in this space particularly. Because I love to cook, I started a ever-growing cookbook collection, and it ranges from Mediterranean to Italian, cake cooking, French, there's also wine cooking in there, and pasta making, which is also what I kind of mocked up on the kitchen counter here. This is most likely what our date night will probably look like on Friday when we're cooking pasta in the pasta maker that my brother got us. Other than that, all the rest of the decor in here is similar to the rest of our space so far, which is pretty much just having everything out where I can see it. I think it's really beautiful to showcase all of the gorgeous treasures and goodies that I've collected and sourced over the years. So I try to keep everything out for me to enjoy it, for my friends and family to enjoy it, etc. I also just think it's really poetic to kind of, again, come down here, grab a bottle off of the counter, grab an antique glass off the shelf, a cookbook off of the built-in, turn on my little dainty lamp that are so fun to decorate with, and it kind of all just work as a really beautiful dance in unison with everything out and kind of working in harmony. So that's kind of how I like to decorate, especially with the kitchen and all the open shelvings and such. It makes for a lot of room for collections. This is also ironically one of the biggest places in the house that I would love to do the most quote unquote work to. When we first purchased this home, we purchased it from a flipping company that did major heavy lifting construction updates, really made it livable, but they also updated it quite a bit in terms of lots of industrial lighting. So you'll notice as we go throughout the rest of the house, all of our other fixtures are very, very antique, old, and really just on par or on design themed with the rest of the era. These are a few examples that have not been updated yet, so I would love to switch those out for some Italian or French bistro kind of sconces, and then I would love to switch this out for maybe even a fabric pendant light with really colorful stripes just to add some whimsical character into the room. I would also love to change some of the dark cabinetry, and just in general, this room, there's a lot of projects to be done, but a thing with owning a very first home is that you really need to learn patience and kind of having to figure out how to add your own little spin and DIY to things to really make it your own, since as late 20s, early 30s newlyweds, you can't just be doing all these big renovation projects. So in addition to all the little touches we added in here already to make it really cozy and lived in, we also did a few other things like add cafe curtains to our very big window over here, and that automatically makes it feel really countryside-esque and lived in. This gorgeous cafe curtain rod is from Duval Kitchens. They are an absolutely exquisite kitchen design team. I think they're based in the UK, but I follow them on Instagram and they give me the utmost inspiration, especially for kitchens and little spaces. And then on it, we have hanging just, again, another little dainty curtain panel piece that I think I got off of Etsy. And they're just raw pieces of, I think, linen or cotton. Then we have more plates that we have on display because I just think they're super gorgeous, and little pillows for when all of our friends sit here after our Christmas party, after a few too many glasses of wine. This is the hungover spot. Overall, ever since I had the concept of owning my own home one day, I always imagined myself standing at some kind of a sink, overlooking a window, cooking or eating or washing dishes, whatever that was. And now I own a home with my husband in the era of the 1800s, and I'm standing in my stone kitchen with my little farmhouse sink and overlooking a field in Bucks County somewhere. And it's truly one of those really dreamy, pinch yourself kind of moments that you're like, it's happening. So it's really, really cool. Now we can head into the living room and the dining room space. Before we walk into the dining room space, I want to touch upon this curtain rod that my husband and I just put up about 2 months ago. I knew I wanted some kind of a barrier between the dining room section and the kitchen, especially because our dining room table is quite literally right there. I wanted something to kind of break up the behind the scenes of all the cooking. So I added this curtain rod with a little lacy drape to kind of poetically separate the two rooms together. Obviously, it doesn't create too much of a barrier, but it's just something to separate the two and kind of give just a differentiation between both of them in a really gorgeous, draped, whimsical, poetic manner. I also just love any kind of drapes that are within the house and not necessarily on a windowsill. I think it just creates a really fun extra element of design. You also have to be very careful when walking through our doorways because they are made for very short people. We have a fair amount of very tall friends, so again, at our annual Christmas party, which I will mention a lot, after a few glasses of wine, many tend to bump their heads a few times. Now we are standing in our living room and our dining room space. It's obviously just one big giant rectangle, and I tried my best to kind of separate the two with styling to kind of make that feel like one space and this feel like this one. So we will start with the dining room. This is our dining room table, and it was actually created by a local who we just so happened to meet right upon moving in here. He used to work for the US military, and now he's retired and enjoys making furniture, so he created this for us. And a fun fact about this table is that instead of signing his name like most artists do in like the bottom corner with pen or something, he actually allows his customers to pick out an empty bullet casing, and he inserts it into the table. I can show you ours is all the way over here, right there. So that's a really cool little storytelling element that we have in yet again another piece of our home. Around the dining room table is my very prized collection of Windsor dining room chairs. And if you are at all into furniture, you would know, number one, how special this collection is, and number two, how expensive and much of an investment this collection is. I would be embarrassed to tell anybody how much I've spent on dining room chairs. Windsor chairs in general, though, are just absolutely magnificent. They're known for their really deep seats, their wide spiral backs, and then their super round arms that they sit on. This one, I'm running you around the table. This one is my favorite. Number one, because it's the most whimsical looking with all of the different cutouts and how each arm is kind of slightly off balance. But it's also from the Mayor of New Hope's antique store, which I think is just really cool. If you've ever been to New Hope, you would know it's the most darling, quaint little river town about 30 minutes south of us. So this is my chair. I have this whole little dining room section currently set up for what our breakfast or brunches will tend to look like on the weekends. If you've ever stayed at our house, you would know that I seriously, truly love to make everything feel like a bed and breakfast and a whole really fun, whimsical experience. So we have it's actually not nice china, but it's from Zara. It looks like nice china. And then we use our really nice napkins. I put the bread on a cutting board instead of the bag. And I just like to make everything feel really homey and like a full experience. I was super blessed to have grown up with a mom that absolutely loves hosting. She would celebrate everything from birthdays to holidays to snow days because we were so excited. New jobs, quitting your job to start your own business, literally whatever it was, she would make everything feel really, really special. So I've kind of infused that into my own life in certain ways. And I also do that with my own hosting. And now I own a home and get to host all these really beautiful gatherings, and I'm still so very much inspired by what she does. So it's been a very special experience owning your first home and filling it with your own gatherings and such like that. This specific space has seen a lot of 4 a.m. espresso martinis, and our floorboards have seen quite a lot of stiletto heels falling through the cracks. Starting with the rest of the decor, we will come over here to one of my favorite gorgeous antique china cabinets. This was actually the first piece that I've ever purchased for our home, and I purchased it about 2 years before I even knew the home existed. I got her when we were living down in Red Bank, New Jersey. It was our very first apartment together, and I was just perusing a local antique store when I first really got into the whole concept of sourcing vintage. I found her and I fell in love. And at that point, I kind of knew I just needed to have some sort of a farmhouse cottage kind of home at some point so that she could thrive the way she was supposed to. So I bought her, and she lived in my parents' garage for about 2 years until we finally found this home. So you could say I manifested this space about 2 years before I even knew about it. Then we can move over into this little alcove right here. This is where we have a few more of our wedding mementos framed in those vintage frames that I mentioned in the foyer. I primarily love doing this because when we moved in, I realized right away that there was no way I could have any sort of gallery with our recent photography in those more like general classic frames. Absolutely nothing wrong with them, but they just don't fit with the character and the elaborateness of the rest of our home, especially when I'm sourcing original artwork that automatically came in those really thick, juicy frames. So to kind of balance that out, I would still find old frames with old prints in them and simply just replace them when I didn't necessarily like the interior. And now not only does our wedding photography and just, it'll be future family photography at some point, or it could be travel photography, it could be whatever. Our recent photography that's more modern now goes so nicely with the authenticness of the rest of the home. And now they also look like art, which I think is really beautiful. Then beneath it, I have just a tiny table that I still kind of have to style. But for now, I have one of the Florentine trays out that I used for our wedding reception. And then I topped it with a few letters from my most prized collection, probably more prized than my Windsor chairs. Actually, definitely more prized than my Windsor chairs. And they are letters from my grandmother and my grandfather dating back to like the 50s, the 40s, the 30s. Before he had passed away, she gave me this collection, and the rest is in a shoebox. So I like to have a few out on display just for special purposes. Same concept of wedding mementos in vintage frames. We have this beauty right here. And I could not bear the thought of having all of our beautiful wedding pieces just tucked away in an attic somewhere collecting dust. So instead, I collected them all out. I made a collage, and here we have save the dates, our menus, the earring I made out of my grandmother's wedding dress that I wore on my rehearsal dinner, postcards that we used for the seating chart, the matchbooks design, the list goes on, and essentially just have it all out on display, again, tucked within a gorgeous antique frame. And now it sits as a beautiful focal point in our dining room, which makes me very, very happy. And then beneath this sits one of our many stone fireplaces we have in our home. We are blessed with 4 of them, but cursed with none of them working. Because it is such an old house dating 200 years old, none of these are actually up to code anymore, and it would cost quite a bit of money to get them all to be working again. So instead, I just throw a bunch of gorgeous different candles in there, and it creates a really beautiful glow, especially in the evening times or during said parties, hosting events, etc. it's a nice romantic touch if I can't actually have a full-blown fire on. Coming over here, we have a little dainty writing desk section. Whenever I used to go through old home magazines or just traditional home magazines in general, I always noticed some kind of like a stationary desk in addition to whatever home office that family may have had. And I fell in love with the idea of having a designated section to write any kind of correspondence you may use, like stationery, thank you cards, welcome cards, or just any notes in general. So I immediately got to work kind of creating that own little section in our home. So we have our antique writing desk, and essentially I covered it with pretty much anything you may need for like those little crafty moments. So we have our notebooks, paintbrushes, a sewing kit, buttons, paint, stationery, and then I also love to decorate with handwritten notes that I kind of just have sprinkled throughout our home in places. I think it makes for a really beautiful personal touch, especially if they're from special loved ones. So that's kind of what this is used for. And then once again, we have another tiny lamp because they're so much fun to decorate with. I also like to incorporate some texture when it comes to pillow covers or blankets or rugs and such. So we have this sheepskin or leather sheepskin rug that I use as like a little chair cushion. We also have another one back in the kitchen by our farmhouse sink, and I really like the way that they look against the wooden tones, and I think that's really beautiful. Coming over here to our little bar table setup, I have everything set on an old dresser. Once again, for the millionth time, using old things for new purposes. Instead of clothing, we just put empty wine bottles or wine bottles that we haven't used yet and kind of just use it for alcohol and hosting storage. This right here is another one of my favorite vignettes in the whole house. We have another gorgeous carved antique mirror, and then it's hugged on either side with gorgeous antique sconces, iron sconces. And then here cascading down, we have overgrown florals, our alcohol bottles, lots of red wine, silver trays, antique glassware, and this all together kind of creates a really beautiful home for all these items. Before we go into the living room, I do want to mention our overgrown greenery. I am a sucker for any kind of very wild, very artistic, messy, imperfect, overgrown arrangements. So we have quite a few of these from Bucks County Nursery. Shannon creates all of them for me. She is so wildly talented. She also did all of my bridal shower floral arrangements. So we love doing projects together because she gets to go a little crazy. She gets to go a little bit crazy with them. This one might be my favorite, but you might see a bunch of others throughout our home as well. So now we will take a very long walk over to our living room, past the door with no doorknob. So now we are in our living room space, which also happens to be what I think is the most full, complete, and finalized room of the house, which is actually a pretty big deal to me considering how long filling a space like this usually takes. I mentioned in the kitchen really needing to learn patience with filling our first home, especially coming from an apartment or most likely your parents' house if it's your first place. None of your furniture from either of those places tends to fill up a big full-scale family home like this. So most of the time you're starting from scratch, and obviously filling it takes years, even just to learn what your style is, to collect all the pieces, decorate all the corners, so on and so forth. So even those Martha Stewart homes that we all know and love take about decades to fill correctly and to have like that really homey lived-in style to them. So having a space that I actually feel is pretty complete is a very proud moment for me. We will start with my favorite piece of this room. Second to this candelabra, she kind of competes for first place. We just got her from, I think it's called the Green Row, and she's stunning. But I'm pretty sure my favorite is still this oversized, very large, chunky coffee table that pretty much sits as the focal point of the whole room. She is one of our DIYs that we did. We got her from Facebook Marketplace, and when we got her, it was a very bright orangey yellow kind of wood color. So we stripped it all down and restained it this really beautiful dark walnut color. I really love the claw footings on it, as well as the iron clasps that are on all of the corners. I think it makes for a really cool like medieval kind of touch. As far as styling goes, this, along with all the other surfaces in our home, is really where I get to play creatively and artistically. as if you couldn't tell already, I love filling surfaces with lots and lots of things, collections, treasures, etc. And I like the concept of someone being able to come in here with their tea or coffee or wine at night and be able to grab literally anything from our coffee table and have a really nice, inspirational, creative experience with whatever that may be. It could be a book or one of the many books that I have collected. It could be one of the matchboxes that my girlfriend got for me for my bridal shower. She knows I love collecting them. It could be the chessboard underneath the candelabra. It could be the postcards, actually they're vintage postcards from our honeymoon in Italy. It could be truly anything over here. The more the merrier, in my opinion, when it comes to having all of your collections out. And then either side of the coffee table, we have our 2 sitting chairs and then our 6-penny sofa. Both are topped with lots and lots of colorful quilts, blankets, pillows, etc. The 2 pink ones are my favorite because they are ruffly and stripy, and I just think they add a really colorful, whimsical moment to the whole space. As far as color goes, our walls tend to be very white, and then we have a lot of wooden accents with the furniture, the floors, etc. So not much color as like the bare bones of the space. So I try to incorporate a ton of color through pretty much everything I just said, whether that's the treasures of the books, the candlesticks are colorful, the pillows, the quilts, the artwork on the walls. Everything else is what kind of makes the space feel really colorful, with the walls and everything else being really simple and like a clean slate to work with. Behind our 6-penny sofa, I can come over here, is a table that my husband actually built for us. One of the other really cool aspects of having your first home, especially one like this that gives you a lot of room for fun DIY, is the fact that there's lots of projects to be done. My dad grew up loving to build. He's very into like little DIY projects like that. His dad, I think, probably taught him. And along the way of owning this home, my husband has also really fallen in love with working with his hands, doing construction, doing home projects. He's really taken after my dad in that sense. So seeing my husband get this new hobby of like woodworking, I guess, has been really, really cool. He has gone from building little tables like this all over our home to building a full-on Irish pub in our detached garage. Hopefully we could take a little sneak peek at that later. And then on here, I again just have more and more books. Coming over to behind the coffee table, we have yet another gorgeous stone fireplace, although this one we are actually currently getting cleaned out because we are getting a wood-burning stove installed in a couple weeks. I am over the moon about that. I cannot wait to finally have some kind of a working fireplace in this house, especially one like a cast iron stove that just feels like that in itself just gives me old home kind of vibes. So that is what will be going here in a few weeks. And then in preparation for that, we have a little antique fireplace set up over here. Very excited to just use this whole section. Above the fireplace, we have another antique French, I think it's called a gilded mirror. It's from the same place that the mirror in the kitchen is from. It's from Très Joliet, something like that. They're French, and they find the most beautiful French European pieces like this. And then above it, I should mention that this is also an antique match holder, which is really cool. So when we do get our fireplace, I'm gonna find the long stemmed matches and that'll sit there. So I love having a little home and little treasure for all those things that you would normally just use a lighter for. Okay, now moving into behind me. These are yet again more built-ins that my husband and my dad created for us when I randomly decided that I needed to have more storage for more of our treasures. So on it we have lots of books, pottery that I found, more candlesticks, and just more little knickknacks. I also had a wood cubby kind of installed as well in hopes that someday we would have a wood burning stove or a working fireplace of some sort. So I also manifested that too. To the left of it, we have a little curtain concealing all of the wires that goes along with the TV, the cable, all the things. So that kind of hides that here in a nice aesthetic way. I have yet to figure out how to hide that one more wire, but please ignore that. And then behind me, we have another piece of original art. I love this one. I think it's very bright and, again, very whimsical. And then the frame TV, which I convinced myself I needed to have in order for the TV to feel even just a little bit more aligned with the home. And then we just have a pretty countryside-esque piece of artwork inside the frame. Above it, we have our last bookshelf that I impulsively decided that we needed, I think last month, right before the holidays. So Kurt quickly went out to Home Depot and built that for us, and it came out great. I think we did it in like 4 hours. And then right after that, I immediately went out to search for more books. Every single time I go to an antique store, even if I'm not looking for it, I will always take home at least one book just to keep adding to our gorgeous collection. At some day when we have kids and maybe even a bigger house, I imagine to have some kind of a library with a ton of really beautiful old books. I tend to also take off all of the book covers too, just so I could see their gorgeous spines. I have a really big thing for typography as a designer, obviously, so that's kind of how I pick out the books that I want. I also go off of certain genres. I will take home anything that is photography related, pottery related, any art genre, and then random ones like sailing. I love sailing books. I have a lot of sailboat books. I don't know how to sail, but it's just a very random hobby that I like. So that pretty much finishes up the downstairs portion of our tour. We can make our way through what is my mom's favorite part of the house, this little secret passageway, and then we'll make our way upstairs. And then as we pass the corner up here, we have even more of my art collection with lots of room on the walls for pieces that I have yet to find. We will start with our guest room. We call this the blue room because it's all monochromatic blue. I love doing that from a design point. I do that a lot in my work. I do it a lot in my fashion. And I think it's really chic when it's done within an interior space as well. We just repainted it to be this really grayish blue, almost colonial, historic kind of color. So that's kind of what everything else on the room is on theme with. I will start with my favorite piece in this room, which is the fabric sitting behind the bed. I believe that it is from the 1960s or 1970s, and I purchased it from an online Instagram sourcer that pretty much goes all over Europe and finds these really beautiful textiles. So I purchased a few panels, sewed them into some curtains, and pretty much used it as almost like a, a headboard or just like a piece of art behind the bed. I also think that's kind of unique. Usually you would see either just a literal headboard or something like a painting. I used curtains instead. And then we have more gorgeous antique plates sitting above it, and then hugging on either side are Italian sconces that are hand painted. In here, I like to utilize a lot of fake candles, not because I don't trust my guests, but just because I'm not the one blowing them out at night, so I tend to keep all of them to be fake. They're also from Amazon, and they have this really nice flickering effect though, so I feel like it gives off the candlelight kind of vibe. In general, again, I said I loved hosting, and I like making everyone feel like they're at a bed and breakfast when they come stay. So most of the time I will have little chocolates on everyone's pillow. I'll have their watercraft filled. Their candle is usually lit, which I forgot to light. And then I always put their towels in the dryer so that they're really warm whenever they come and finally get up to this side of the house. Over here, as I turn this candle on, is a big space behind me for a piece of art I haven't found yet. I mentioned that filling a home takes a really long time, so there are a lot of spaces in this house that have a lot of blank wall for me to continue sourcing really beautiful things. Over here we have more hooks where people can hang up their coats, their cardigans, their bags, whatever that may be. Obviously they're black iron, which goes along with the bed frame. And then there's this piece. This is a gorgeous, another Facebook Marketplace find, but a gorgeous armoire. And I picked her up about 2 hours away, once again, down at the Jersey Shore. And while I measured her dimensions to ensure that she would fit in this little corner, I did not measure her dimensions to ensure she would fit up our tiny staircase. So after a big effort from my mom, my dad, and my husband, we realized it just simply wasn't going to work, and we went back to the drawing board. 2 or 3 weeks later, my dad came up with the most bizarre but brilliant plan to use a pulley system to hoist this onto our first story roof, which you can see right outside this window. And it's the most funniest video my mom has on her phone of the two of them, my husband and my dad, down on the first floor outside, literally pulleying this giant piece of furniture up on this contraption that they created together. And then my brother and I up on the roof catching it as it kind of fell backwards. So we somehow got it in here, but we will not be taking it with us when we ever leave this home. We're not going to do it again. So she's going to stay and be enjoyed during our chapter in this home. But then in it, I fill with all of our winter collections, like our scarves and such. And then I have a really nice collection of lots of picnic blankets that we tend to use for summer and spring picnics. Coming over here, we have our third fireplace in the home. This is kind of what inspired me to paint it this really beautiful blue color, because I just love the color combination of the really gorgeous rustic stonework and then the more colonial color. I think it goes beautifully together. Above here, we will have artwork at some point, pretend it's there, more artwork, and then a writing desk I have yet to style. The last little space worth mentioning in this room is this beautiful little section here. This is a 1900s dresser chest, I believe. The person at the antique store told me the era because of how I think they're called hinges were formed and how the wood kind of tucks into each other. So that kind of explains what era it's from, which is, again, another historic piece. And then we have another beautiful overflowing arrangement from Bucks County Nursery. I wanted red in this room because there's this whole concept of the red theory where if you add bits and pops of red, it just automatically makes for a really beautiful aesthetic experience. Because it's so large, it's kind of hiding another original artwork behind it, but this is a painting of, or I think it's actually a crayon painting of a woman holding blue flowers, which I think goes, once again, perfectly in our monochromatic room. And again, with lots and lots of fake candles because I don't trust my guests all the time. Now we can move into my home office. Again, as a designer, my whole job and life is pretty much formed around storytelling in some capacity. So having our first home together where we get to tell our story in all the spaces through art, design, furniture, texture, color, and all that is one of the biggest dreams come true for me. Again, simply from an artistic standpoint and getting to tell so many client stories, but getting to tell our story in this special first place. I think no matter what home we ever move into, this one will always be a really, really special one because it's kind of where that whole story started. As cliche as that sounds, that's probably why I've loved it so much.
Yeah, and also I think it's fun just to be creative together. You know, like we look in each room, so like, oh, what can we do in this room? Like, let's add this. Like, give it more personality. And I think that's just fun to do together.
Thank God for Kurt. Kurt's so good. And I'm really quick with my ideas. Like, I'll see something randomly in the middle of a work day, and I'm like, ooh, I think this would be really cool if we do something like this. And Kurt's like, all right, going to Home Depot. What else
like,
do we have to
she'll
get?
say this at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then like that night we'll go to Home Depot and get it done.
Yeah, but then it'll be done.
It's fun,
so like
though.
things
It's
like
different.
that, it's granted we do have our own schedules and such, so we're very blessed for that as well. But we're able to kind of just be free with creativity and do a project whenever we want. All the bookcases behind us were just randomly put up one day when we felt like adding a bookcase. So that's also, you're right, been like a really fun aspect of home building together.
And also like the first 3 years of our relationship, we were in an apartment, so we couldn't do any of that because we had a landlord. So now we can finally bring all that to life.
Be crazy.
Yeah, be crazy.
So now we are walking into my home office, my design studio. This is where I run my design business, Aurora Designed, which is named after the Northern Lights, where science, or in my case, strategy, combines with magic to create something beautiful. That's kind of like the whole mantra behind what I do. And I essentially create soulful and poetic brand identities and custom websites for other really creative individuals or small businesses. So I really needed a place that felt very artistic, very inspiring, and very creative, which is hence my home over here. You'll notice before we pivot over there that this space also has a dual usage of also a dressing room. When we moved in, we initially had a closet in our bedroom, but as we were trying to kind of figure out where our king size bed was gonna go, it just simply wasn't going to work. So we actually had people come and take that down and install one in this room that I later concealed with some antique curtains. So that kind of turned half of this room into a dressing space and then half into remaining my art studio. Luckily, both styles kind of mesh together. You have like the artistry and the craftsmanship and the whimsicalness of the art section, and then you have the more dainty, feminine, I guess girly kind of feel of the dressing room section. So starting over here, we obviously have my workstation. I work on an antique desk and I sit on an antique chair, obviously. I feel like a Victorian princess when I sit on this gorgeous pink chair. She is from Chelsea Forge Antiques and Design, again, where so much of our home is from. And then up here I have my favorite bulletin board inspiration wall, and I essentially will add anything to it that sparks some creativity or happiness or joy or quite literally anything that will inspire my work. We have lots and lots of book covers, stationery that I made, stationery that I received, lots of bits from our wedding because that will forever be inspiring to me. A Polaroid of my uncle's sailboat, again, random sailboat obsession. Pieces of book tear-outs, Victorian purses because that's just absolutely gorgeous, and so on and so forth. So I will always add to this whenever I am traveling or just collecting things and pretty much pin everything up there. It also is like a really cool work of art. Beneath it is another desk or another little table that my husband built. And then once again, it is topped with lots of art books, film cameras from my grandmother's basement that were once my grandfather's, and lots of paintbrushes, X-Acto knives, etc. Then behind me, we have our fourth and final fireplace, although this one I don't put anything in because I'm too nervous that I'm very close to it in tight quarters over here. So that one just stays empty and just for show. Up here we have more space for found artwork. You could tell that I recently took something off of there. I tend to switch a lot of art a lot whenever I'm feeling like something belongs elsewhere. So it's always a nice work in progress. This one, on the other hand, will always be staying. This is one of the framed letters that I mentioned downstairs that my grandfather wrote to my grandmother, and I framed it in a blue frame to match the blue penmanship on the interior. So this will forever be a special piece, and she will be staying in my office. Beneath it, we have one of the basket daisies that, once again, Bucks County Nursery made for us. The other one is down in the kitchen, but I think it just creates a really nice countryside kind of feel in here. And then moving over to the dressing room section. Actually, before we get there, I should mention this gorgeous antique European lamp that we just got installed yesterday. I was on a time crunch and I called the electrician. I was like, I have to do something for Homeworthy tomorrow and I want to show them this beautiful lamp light fixture. It took quite a bit of rewiring, again, because it was from Europe, so that was not something we wanted to mess with. We have put up the rest of the light fixtures, but this one was a little too complicated and way too whimsical for me. So they did it for us and she looks so darling. Now we will come over here to another antique armoire, although this one is more of an heirloom piece. It is from my grandmother and my grandfather, and they so graciously let me take it. It also has my maiden name, Marino, written in on the back. My grandfather probably wrote it at some point, so this is a really special piece to me as well. And then if you follow me on TikTok, you would know what's inside. I have an overflowing collection of vintage and antique dresses. It's kind of like a series that people ended up really loving on my TikTok page. I tend to purchase a lot and then bring them over to my seamstress, who has become a very good friend of mine, and we rework a ton of really old pieces to make them wearable again. I did this quite a bit during my wedding journey, so it's a fun thing that everyone online also likes to kind of engage with me with. So just to give you a few examples, this one is a 1930s beauty that I wore on my very first wedding anniversary in Block Island, Rhode Island. And then this one is actually from the Great Depression, so quite literally a piece of history. There's a special tag on it that shows that it was created during that era, which is wildly fascinating. And I wore this to, I think, a New York City performance of some sort. So this collection is very, very special, very old, and the reason I lock my doors at night. Then moving over here, we have another piece that I have sought after for a really long time, and it is our French settee, also from Chelsea Forge. This is a piece that I imagine being in many spaces in future homes. I could picture her in a foyer. I can picture her in a sunroom with lots and lots of plants and gardens, etc. So I'm really excited to see kind of where else this may live. I also really love the green, sage green color because it brings in colors of the antique rug in here along with the pinks and the mauves and such. So she's a really fun piece and where I throw a lot of my clothes on when I need to get them off the floor. And then on top, I just have a few of my antique photo albums. One was given to me by my maid of honor. The other one I found on eBay, and it's a reminder for me to actually start making our wedding albums because we're about a year and a half late and I need to start doing that. So this is my very beautiful decorated reminder to get started. And now we will go into the last room of the house, which is our bedroom.
Advice that I would give to young couples, I would say, for buying their first home, definitely have extra cushion, like money aside, because you never know what's gonna happen. Like I think like in our first week, like the septic got backed up, we had a plumbing issue. The bee problem.
We had bees that covered
like
one half of our entire house. It was so bizarre.
Yep. And then
Kurt was like, don't come outside.
Yeah, stay indoors. There's like 1,000 of bees going around. And also like a tree fell or something. So, so it's just like all these unexpected things that are pretty expensive. So that's my advice. I would say definitely have some money aside just so for those unexpected events.
Coming from the finance person and then coming from the art person,
Yeah, there we go.
I would suggest really looking into vintage. Our entire home, as if you couldn't tell behind us, is very, very antique, vintage, thrifted, inspired because so many things are so expensive. And I talk about that a lot in our tour, like having all these ideas and visions, but there's so much cost that kind of comes into play. But if you go to antique stores in your area, vintage stores, go online on eBay, Etsy, etc. There's so many gorgeous, gorgeous pieces for so much less than what you would even get at something like Target. So kind of being creative in a filling standpoint and sourcing standpoint is something that really helped us fill the home so far only after 2.5 years. I think that's really beneficial.
Yeah. Also, did you say Facebook Marketplace?
Facebook Marketplace
and that's a big
is a
one.
good one. We've
That's
driven
like,
all over.
Especially in our area. It's like
yeah.
So we have like in an antique heaven.
Well, we live right by Lancaster, which is very good for furniture. So we book out 2 hours there and back every so often because I'm like, oh, found another like thing that we could fill the house with. So yeah, definitely utilizing all of those different places that aren't like expensive home decor stores. So now we are walking into the very last room of the house, which is our master bedroom. This is probably the only room that does not have any of the old gorgeous house charm that all of our other rooms are blessed with. It is where the pumpkin pine wood flooring stops and the more just outdated hardwood flooring begins. And there's no kind of hardwood beams or wooden beams. There's no fireplace, pretty much just a regular bedroom. So we really had to do a lot of DIY decoration to kind of enhance and reestablish that beautiful old charm that all the other spaces have. So we started to do that with another antique rug that kind of brings in lots of beautiful mauves, greens, beiges, etc. that are used elsewhere in this space. And then my favorite part is the faux wooden beams that we added to all of the walls. This automatically, in my opinion, creates that sense of English charm immediately as you walk into the room, which is kind of why this has become one of my favorite spaces in the house. I really love how they look. We actually started by trying to add them to the ceiling, but yet again, because it's an old home, we couldn't figure out where the actual beams were for them to then be nailed into. So we opted to put them on the sides, and I actually really prefer it like that. I think it looks really, really charming. And then over here on the primary bedroom area is our headboard. That is, once again, another DIY. When I purchased this, it was initially all creamy white. It was painted over, I think, like 5,000 times. So I stripped it down, which took me quite a while. And then I restained it to be the nice espresso walnut color that we've used a lot, like in the coffee table downstairs. And once again, it already creates, or immediately creates, that French chateau, English cottage, countryside kind of headboard. I love her. And then behind it, we have another antique French tapestry, once again creating that royal feeling. I also wanted to keep it kind of similar to the guest bedroom where we also used fabric behind that bed frame as well. And then on either end, we draped more drapery, more curtains for, once again, a very, very layered, collected, cozy, but still really elegant kind of look. I also really like the concept of layering mirrors on top of things. So we have a little dainty, cute wooden mirror in the middle as well. And then on either side, we have a pair of, I think it's John Stewart, if that's the correct name, nightside tables. I'm pretty sure we got them at an incredible deal, again, at a local antique store, because when I looked online, it seemed like they were well over $1,000, but I got them both for $300, I think. So that's great. And then on top, I just have, we can ignore Kurt's section because it's manly decorated. Mine's nice and curated and has lots of books. My book club book I'm currently reading, wedding portraits, and dried florals from my wedding bouquet, which I think is really special. Funny story about these lamps. Obviously, it's once again an antique, gorgeous fringe lamp. I purchased this, I think, 2 years ago, and then always kept my eye out for one that looked even remotely similar, just because I knew I probably would never find the same one, but I needed something that kind of balanced it, at least in some way. But then as I was walking through another store, I did end up finding almost the exact same thing, just with a slightly different fabric on top, and I immediately snatched it off the shelves and took it home. And now we have 2 matching lamps that I got at separate times, which is a blessing. To the left over here, I have my gorgeous getting ready wedding morning robe hanging up, again, because I just like to use all of our wedding things as decor. It is a vintage Christian Dior robe and also my something blue for the morning. And then just more pieces of little artwork that I'm hoping to also infuse into the rest of this space. Other than that, we have, which you've probably noticed in all the other rooms, very, very deep and wide windowsills, which is another kind of element to having an old home. They are so much fun to style. I do a lot with books, obviously, because what else would I put there? And lots of plants and greenery. So those are very fun and also make for a really nice reflected light that comes through. Another little footstool with more books. And then we have a few antique mirrors. This one's a really beautiful carved wooden one. And then the one right behind us is a really cool antique iron carved silver moment, and that sits above my little makeup station, which is very small, and I need to find a bigger one. Then last but not least is this back corner. Because again, we have a fairly small spaced home with not too many closets and not too much storage, we really try to utilize every single furniture piece we have in the house. We have the 2 dressers in the guest room that we still fill with our clothes. We have the little closet and the armoire out there, and then we have this one, which also happens to be an heirloom quality piece. It is from one of our good friends' father's fathers, so it's been in their family for a long time, and we are very happy that they so graciously gave it to us. So this is refinished by the same man that did our kitchen table or our dining room table downstairs. So he is wildly talented with any old furniture. And then on it is kind of just my girly collection. Bless my husband, he doesn't have that many things that he enjoys to have out on display. That's kind of what his bar in the garage is for. So he lets me kind of overwhelm everything with all my little things. I have lots of jewelry. This one, for example, I had custom made after our honeymoon in ode of it. We have a painted picture of Tuscany and then a painted picture of sheep. And those are the 2 locations that we went to, Ireland and Tuscany. So this one's really fun. And then other fun jewelry collections, a candelabra, obviously, and photos from my grandparents, my husband's grandparents, and little notes from our siblings, etc. So a very treasured and personal kind of space over here, sided by another gorgeous, overflowing, whimsical floral arrangement. Last but not least, in this room, we have probably the only non-antique thing in our house. This is actually from Home Depot, but it's made to look antique, so we bought it. And this is where I hang all of my gorgeous robes. Because I work from home, I don't necessarily get ready for work every day. You'll most likely find me working in one of my robes, either this one, which is a vintage waffle, very whimsical girly one, or this velvet Ralph Lauren one, which makes me feel like the mother in The Haunting of Hill House. When I run through our old home in it, I feel like it's a haunted vibe. And that pretty much rounds out our 2nd floor space of our home. So now we can head over to the Irish pub in our detached garage and we can meet my husband there. Come on. It's really cold out here. I could really use a beer. Come on. Hey, babe.
Hey, what can I get you? I didn't see you there.
Well, it looks like it's frozen, so I did want a beer, but I think instead you can just give us a tour of your little Irish pub bar.
Perfect. Excellent. Welcome to what we call the stable. So I originally built this bar for Kate because she wanted a bar for an after party for the bridal shower that she had. So I pretty much put all this together, I don't know, within a month, like 3 weeks or so. So to start out on the outside, I got the pallet wood here, and I got the stopper down here. And then all this wood is pretty much from Home Depot, Facebook Marketplace, like we talked about earlier. And all in all, it probably took about a month to build and probably like $250 to $300 with like the finish and everything like that. And then all this other stuff was just over the past year and a half, just Amazon, just putting my own character into it. I love Germany, so I have the Bavarian flag up there. Love Ireland, so I got the Irish flag. Jameson, of course. Favorite baseball team is the New York Yankees, so you got to represent with the Yankees up top. Drexel for Kate's school. High Point, and then bam, a Roll Tide. Well, thank you guys for stopping by. It's unfortunately the winter season, so everything is frozen, so I can't pour you a beer, but please come back in the spring and summertime.
Home to me is essentially wherever your heart is. So wherever Kurt is my home. We could be in a hotel, we could be in our home, wherever that is. My family is my home. But more so in this space, or context with this space, home would be building a family here and creating our most special memories here, whether that's cooking in the kitchen, eating at our very special dining room table, being by the fire that we're gonna have at some point in our old fireplaces, and just creating all these memories through life together. I feel like that makes it feel like home.
Home to me is a breath of fresh air where you're used to everything. It's your comfort place. You can make dinners with your wife, and there's just no stress. It's just an easy living, just a wholehearted great place to be. For me, that's home.
Coming home to it after like a long trip or something.
Yep.
I like
Put your
that
feet up and not worry about where the feet's going or something.
Not with shoes on though.
Not with shoes on.
That was good. Good job. Okay.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content, shopping guides, and so much more.